Welcome to Playful Beginnings, a podcast about the magic of play therapy for therapists, students, and anyone interested. In our podcast, we'll explore the deeper understanding of play therapy and the skills we use when working with children.
We hope to help you understand the why behind what we do and how it helps kids heal and grow. I'm Dr. Christy Opiola, a working play therapist and university professor in North Carolina.
I'm Dr. Maggie Parker, a play therapist. Good morning, Christy.
Good morning, Maggie. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. So excited to have Dr. PJ Blanco here with us today. PJ,
we've been waiting for this one.
Yeah. And you were in the doc program when I was in the doc program and when Christy was in the master's, but we didn't really overlap much. I just remember seeing you.
And PJ was my supervisor.
Yeah, for your second
year.
For my
clinical experience in my second year when I was over at the CFRC.
Oh,
it's a great experience.
Yeah, he was a great supervisor. So full circle moment here, coming and
I love it.
Spending time with us.
Well, and so PJ, you are a prominent researcher and educator specializing in child-centered play therapy and in the schools and how it impacts academics. A full professor, congratulations, at Tarleton State, the clinical training coordinator. You're chairing all sorts of faculty searches. You're doing so many things in addition to over 24 research articles on child-centered play in the schools. And so we're just really excited to hear about you and what kind of brought you to looking at this aspect of CCPT.
Yeah, so glad to be here. You know, you say 24 articles. I don't know if I have that many, but I haven't looked, but it's been a journey. So
I counted.
And I know you counted. Okay, good. So you lost track. But yeah, I've been busy doing some research. It's actually been a little bit quieter lately after COVID. Things have slowed down in doing research specifically in the schools.
Harder to get into.
Yes, I've noticed
They're much more protected.
Much more protected, a lot more red tape, whether that's from the university or from that I work with or just school districts in general. They're a lot more cautious. Parents seem a lot more cautious in signing a consent form. So there has been a lot of that in my experience in trying to do more research in the school lately, that there does seem to be a lot more of a challenge to get into the school and providing services, at least as an outsider.
So which is such a shame, PJ, because so many kids experience difficulties in school settings, not just academically, right? But some of their mental health, the idea of self-esteem, anxiety, depression, all sorts of stuff that can impact social challenges, that can impact their academic ability. And, you know, they consistently are at school. And so when we can provide services, or my experience has been when we can provide services at school, right, kids get really consistent care. And I think that's where your work has really, for me, has been prolific, is just looking at how does it not only help in those aspects, but also academic achievement. When we're able to support them because of these other factors, we can actually help them feel more confident, I don't want to say to help them achieve better, because I know that's not our goal, but but the byproduct is they do better in school when these other pieces are supported.
Yeah, I was doing some research the other day and just kind of doing some math, and I saw that a child typically who goes to school, kindergarten to 12th grade, they spend, 14,000 hours in school?
Jeez.
And could you imagine spending 14,000 hours in a place where you don't feel you're good enough, or that it's a place that accepts you, or that you're wanted?
That you belong.
Yeah. And so the impact that can really have. And so,
and that the only important part of you is your cognitive capacity, right? Because that's
for sure.
Unfortunately, with no child left behind rules and extra effort on academic testing and, yearly testing for either school grade reports or other stuff, new restrictions about what allows you to move on and not move on. Really, what they're sharing is that they really only care about your cognitive capacity, yet children don't, we can't silo a developmental area. They're holistic developers. So if one is lagging, it's going to impact all other parts of their abilities. And so
absolutely. And so, recognizing that kids spend so much time in a place that is so focused on how they're doing academically, I really saw play therapy as being a place that should be embedded in the school system, because of my belief that kids need a place where they feel accepted and supported, not only to grow academically, but just to grow as people.
Yeah.
And so I like to share this story that, when my first research, so when I was doing my dissertation, I purposely chose at-risk first graders. And I don't know necessarily how that population got set up, why I should choose first grade versus any other grade. But then I started thinking about my own first grade experience. And so as a first grader, I was a little wild, had some concerns. And so I was in a remote area of Texas. My dad was in the Air Force and we were stationed in a kind of a remote area of Texas. And I went to first grade and I remember a couple times I got in trouble. One time I had a poster board and wrote a four-letter word that started with an S and got the whole class when the teacher left the classroom to chant that word and then erased it, of course, when the teacher came back. And that led me to getting suspended from school the next day. And I remember getting up and getting ready for school and my mom, they don't want you back. You're not allowed to go to school tomorrow or, this morning. And not really fully understanding, oh, it's because I made my class do something that I thought was really silly and funny. And so that teacher I had in my first grade year was a bad fit. And I recognize the importance of good teacher fits, but I remember her distinctly pulling me to the corner of the classroom and saying, you're never going to amount to anything. You're probably going to end up in jail. And I was a first grader, 7 years old, 6 years old, and hearing this information, and, to think that maybe the teacher had other things on her plate, misguided. Now as an adult, I can see that. But as a first grader, I was, wow, this is my perception. Luckily, I had a family that was very supportive, that was always caring, that was always very much trying to provide for my emotional needs as well as my academic needs. And so that didn't push me back, but I can imagine for another child that could be devastating. And I mean, I still remember it, so it did affect me in some capacity, but I could see it kind of really harming other kids and their ability to be successful in schools. And so when I initially was looking at my initial research study on academic achievement, it was kind of two-parted. One part was I really saw the value in play therapy and specifically child-centered play therapy in providing emotional support for children. Well, if they're in school, we should probably provide it in school because that's where they are. The other part of that is, as a kid, is I recognize the importance of the teacher-child fit. And so at the time, Dee had been doing some research on teacher stress and the importance of the kind of just the dynamic between kids and how if their teachers feel good about them, they might feel good about how they're doing in school. And so that kind of helped me get started with my dissertation. Because when I initially looked at doing child-centered play therapy, specifically seeing if it changed or improved academic achievement, Dee was very much, oh, you should probably look at other factors too, just in case you don't find anything or there isn't that connection. And so that's what kind of led me to looking at social teacher stress and I guess social emotional factors as well. But looking at doing play therapy in the schools is our kids are there. I remember at the clinic, I would go to the schools as a doctoral student and see all these kids in schools. I loved going to the schools and I had full plates. I remember one day I had 9 kids and one, and I worked multiple days because I just loved the environment. But I remember Dee saying at the end of the spring semester, hey, you're welcome to transfer any kid that you see in the school to the clinic. We can even do it sliding scale or even, I think it was even pro bono at the time. And I would refer multiple kids. And out of the years of referring kids, out of 20 kids, one kid showed up at the clinic, for services because, it's not, when you move the resources back into from the school setting to an outside agency, a lot of families of the kids who really need services don't have the capacity to get the child to the clinic or don't have the time or maybe there isn't the support there. And so really seeing kids in the schools to me is a way of really meeting the kids that potentially don't have the opportunity to get the services they need.
We do a lot of work in schools here, PJ, in Charlotte, and one of the things that we have found is it's the families that are working second and third shift that really take advantage of the play therapy services in schools because play therapists kids are in school, and then when we're available, these parents are working. And because there are mental health deserts across, all of our states and all across our country, where there may not be easy accessibility for some of the children that, gosh, if we're not providing in schools, that means a whole bunch of kids,
Okay.
there's just not accessibility to services. And so I've always seen, and it's probably influenced by my time at North Texas, right? As schools being a really pertinent component and partnership to make sure that we can help kiddos. And I know that's why community in schools are in existence, and there's some other things. In our area, a lot of our community in schools personnel are not mental health professionals. And so they're providing a lot of great social support and some other things, but the mental health needs aren't always fully being met because that's not really their expertise. So then where do kids, and as school counselors are, their caseloads keep exploding and they're a little restricted on what they can do. They do, in our area, they do more crisis management and then referral out. But even that data looks miserable when you refer out.
Yeah, the school counselors, I mean, they have so much work put on their plates all the time, and they're often expected to do work that's academically based and and they don't have the resources, and sometimes they don't have the training too to
Right.
really work with all the barriers that they come across. I think the ratio is supposed to be what, 250 to one school counselor, and I think it depends on the level as to
Yeah.
elementary, but the average, I think last I saw, was 450 to one. So maybe depending on what school district you're at, you're going to have school counselors maybe more involved, or maybe one who's less involved, or who can provide those types of services. It's really a crapshoot as to how effective the school counselor can be. It really depends on the school and the principal, sometimes the administration.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, we
yeah, we do
find
have a lot of kids who, sometimes have some support, and other kids who sometimes can go to school all day and not feel they have any support.
Right.
Yeah. And we have found that in the state that I live in, the ratio is 500 to 1.
Oh,
So
wow.
500 kids to one elementary school counselor. And many of the school counselors, their training is more cognitive and behavioral. And so, how do we care for our youngest students in their grades? Because we know, and maybe this is my own bias, but developmentally, right? Yes, CBT can be helpful, but if they're still really developing cognitively, are we matching their developmental level, or are we really scaffolding to try to get them higher? And then are things getting missed? Which is where CCPT, it feels such a right placement in the school setting,
Absolutely.
especially elementary.
And so part of the trick of getting into the school setting then was really about demonstrating, can CCPT be an effective intervention in increasing academic scores, as a way of going, oh, this is an intervention we believe we know helps with social emotional concerns, but it's then the tying in, oh, but this potentially could help academics as well. And so that's kind of where my research agenda kind of started. And it started with my dissertation, which looked at those, I guess, the academically at risk first graders. So it's kind of a study that was interesting in the sense that we looked at kids who were identified at risk academically by the school district, that they would not complete that grade, that they were at risk of failure for that grade academically. Now, on the list of criteria, I think one of the criteria was foster care was one of the criteria, but a lot of them were benchmark testing and that sort of things, or not reading at grade level. And so that first study was kind of, well, CCPT potentially be effective. And surprisingly, or surprisingly to other people, maybe not so surprisingly to me, we found that if we can provide that container and give the child, a safe environment for them to explore being themselves in the way that they want to at their own pace, that we found that we saw really high improvement rates, statistically significant improvement rates in the overall achievement scores from pre-test to post-test, as compared to those kids that were at risk who didn't get that support. And so that was kind of the initial study. And from that study, it was, well, we had these kids who were already in play therapy and their scores were increasing. And so we started seeing the control kids, as we wanted to do, to make sure that those control kids were also getting support. But we continued seeing the kids who were a part of the initial study as part of, the following semester. We saw them once a week for 12 weeks. And so they had 26 sessions in play therapy. And we then were able to measure them using kind of a multiple regression. And we found that these kids' scores continued to improve. And it was amazing just looking at I'm not, clinical significance or statistical significance, I think, is important for a lot of people, but showing the clinical significance was important, where you're able to show the stair step of this kid's score was at below average or very poor, and at the end of the school year, you see it kind of continue to score up and up, so that at the end of the year they're at grade level. And showing that for all of the kids, that we had the stair step of the kids who got play therapy, that their scores continue to increase and they continue to do better in school. Now, I wish now if I could go back in time to kind of do some sort of mixed methods piece and talk to administrators or talk to teachers to kind of see how they were doing in school. Because the test was the YCAT, which is an achievement test that we used, but it would be interesting to see if the teachers also saw that improvement. And I didn't get a lot of teacher data because I struggle with getting teacher and parent data because of how busy teachers and parents are. I find that in my research, I kind of don't utilize that as frequently because I have so much of a drop off in collecting data. But those are the first two initial studies, and having those promising results was really cool. And that led to my third study, which was looking at, the same thing about academic achievement in schools, but I also looked at performance anxiety because my question was, now we have an answer that CCPT seems to be effective in helping academic growth. Now the question is why?
Right.
Why is it getting better? So I wanted to pair the achievement test with some other instrument about why is it maybe getting better. And the first thought I thought was about performance anxiety. I was reading Landreth's book, The Art of the Relationship, and there's a line in there about that if a child feels better in the school, they'll do better in school, which is something that it's okay. So maybe it's about performance. Maybe it is about I feel safer in my environment to then perform. And so we were able to use kind of a sub-test in the RCMS. There is a specific little sub-test that you can do on performance anxiety. And so we looked at providing child-centered play therapy to a whole bunch of first graders. But the problem I had run into is I moved to a different institution. And the institution I was in, the IRB board, kept coming back and saying, you cannot discriminate between normal functioning and academically at risk functioning. I was, what? They didn't want us to see it. And I tried back and forth, but it was, if you're going to do a study, you have to do it with normal functioning kids as well as at-risk kids. And the problem you run into is when you're trying to identify at-risk kids, your population sample shrinks completely. And so I said, well, let's do it with normal functioning kids. Let's try it out. Let's see how normal functioning kids do. And so we did CCPT with, normal functioning kids. We saw kids for 16 sessions, over the course of a semester. And we found again that the composite score on the academic achievement test, we found statistical significance for kids who are normal functioning who got play therapy versus the kids who were not normal, who were normal functioning and didn't get play therapy. So we continue to see this great results. That study, we also looked at the Woodcock-Johnson brief achievement scores because we were limited when the YCAT caps out, I think, at 7 years, 11 months. And so the Woodcock-Johnson would help us with older kids. And unfortunately, with the brief achievement test with the Woodcock-Johnson, we didn't find significant results. So that kind of pushed us back to looking at maybe younger kids. But then that also makes sense for looking at CCPT, and the idea that it's typically we're looking at working with younger kids anyway. But for the performance anxiety, we found that there was a decrease in performance anxiety in all kids, whether they were in the control group or whether they were in the experimental group. There was a little bit more of a decrease in the experimental group, but it wasn't statistically significant. And we kind of capitalize that to kids over time as they spend time in school. Hopefully they feel safer. So we weren't able to find that. And that was kind of the third study. And with that third study, we were then able to kind of do what we replicated for the original study. We did a long-term follow-up where those kids who were in play therapy continued. And we found that those kids who were continuing, that we found the same kind of results, that they continued to have achievement, their early achievement composite continued to score higher. Of course, we lose our control group, so it is a kind of a multiple regression study, but we found statistical significance. So that was kind of exciting. And so they're kind of the first 2 years of doing this research. And so it led to, okay, well, we don't know the why yet. So we want to continue investigating the why. And so, or do we want to maybe look at a different population? And so we end up looking at let's go younger. can we go younger and see if the effects impact younger? So when we looked at a study looking specifically at the at-risk kindergartners, and so IRB board, another year, another shot, was able to articulate maybe better why we needed to look at risk kids, got the approval, and so did a research study with at-risk kindergartners, and which I think is really important because as kids come to school, if they're already struggling at kindergarten, you're going to continue struggling over and over your
Right.
years. So providing some sort of preventative care or care early intervention is going to make more sense. And so again, we found the same thing that their academic achievement scores for the kids who got play therapy who are academically at risk were significantly higher than the kids who did not get play therapy who were at risk. And so that was kind of, where we kind of moved from there is I took another shot the following year about why. Why is CCPT helping out? And so I found this really cool intervention. I got to give credit to Dr. Holloman. So Ryan Holloman is my partner in crime through a lot of these articles. And so we found this instrument that had the picture of Garfield, and it was on reading, intrinsic motivation specifically, and related to reading. And so kids, it was a picture of Garfield. I like to read, or, I read on my own for fun, and it has Garfield smiling, and then it has a picture. I don't like to read, and he's kicking a book or something. The problem is when you give any kid an instrument that they pick there's that, they're trying to
Yeah.
pick what they think is best or what's cool or fun to them. So, a lot of them, we had kids who obviously did not like to read who were picking the Garfield smiling because of the age range that we looked at. But I think that's just indicative of young kids and testing too, right? If
Yeah.
you're asking kids for specific data, they're going to have a lot of false positives, which is, there's adults that do that too. So let's
Yeah.
not just, and so we looked at this intrinsic motivation component to see if we could find some information there. And so for the study, we looked at-risk kids. Again, we found the same thing for academic achievement scores and the YCAT, that kids who got play therapy scores statistically significantly higher than the kids who were in the waitlist control group for academic achievement. For intrinsic motivation, we found nothing. So that's the tough part, right? Is that being a researcher, you're trying to find the why, and you're asking the why to come from kids.
Yeah.
And so you run into the measurement challenges as to what measurement do you choose. And so that was kind of the struggle with our studies when it comes to finding the why. The why is a good question. I'm still exploring the why. I've kind of given up maybe the why because maybe there's beauty in that, the fact that it works.
Yeah.
And I think it works because a child goes into the room, they have somebody who cares about them, who cherishes them for that 30 minutes. Some kids in the playroom played out academic themes. Some kids never played out academic themes. Well,
And
and
that,
thinking about play therapy in the schools, specifically as a child-centered play therapist, Ryan and I wrote an article, or not an article, wrote a chapter in that new play therapy research theory and practice book.
oh,
And
cool.
in the chapter, I spent 3 or 4 pages just going over in the past 10 years, here's the play therapy research in the school setting. So there's
Who
several.
who is that book edited by?
I'm using it for my advanced play class. Let's see here. It's this white one here.
Oh, with
I think he's one of the
Crenshaw.
authors. So
Yeah, and
credit.
Stewart. That's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah. So,
And
but
that
my
is a
whole point,
good
I
kind of
enjoyed writing
like,
the chapter because I got to write the case
yeah,
study, which is my favorite part. And then I got to write the part on kind of summarizing the research because it's really interesting just to see in the past 20, 15 years how much school-based research is happening. It is happening.
yes. And I think that's important for people to hear. I also love that book because it really is a holistic view of play therapy.
Hmm.
You've not only do you have all the different therapeutic approaches, but then you've got these other kind of specialty milieu areas about, if it's in the school. I wrote a chapter about medical,
Hmm.
kids with
Yes.
medical components. And so I think there's one on trauma. So there's just a
Hmm.
lot of nice different areas in
Different little
that book. So if
chapters.
people don't have it, I think it's a comprehensive guide to play therapy, right? Is that what it's called?
It's research, theory, research, and practice.
Practice, play therapy theory, research, and
Yes.
practice. Yeah,
And
it
the
came
other
out
part
in,
of it that's really cool is just the chapters on child-centered play therapy and CPRT. It's
mhm.
such a nice 30-page
Yep.
short snapshot where you get the whole piece there. And so
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that book. So my
Yes.
students in
Yeah.
advanced play have also talked about how much they've enjoyed it as well, just because, when they read this book, it's, oh, this is all of Dr. Lander's book in one chapter. Yes, and I remembered most of it. That's good too.
Yay, we did our jobs as academics, but you remembered it. But yes, I think we've used that book in our contemporary theories class here of play therapy
Yeah,
because so many different areas get talked about or different theoretical
theories. Yes,
approaches. It reminds me of what is
there was
that
one by
book?
Schaefer, right?
There,
One by
yeah, there
Schaefer.
was one by Schaefer. It's just a little dated, unfortunately, and
Yeah,
will stay dated. I know there's some people working on maybe
version
taking
of it.
over the editorial components, but since we
Yeah.
lost such a great leader in our field,
Hmm.
right? So I'm grateful for David, Ann, and Dee for kind of picking up that as well. But thank you so much for your time. I could probably
Thank
talk
you
to you
for
all
inviting me.
day. I would love to talk and maybe do some partnership and do some multi-site school
Absolutely,
studies
for sure.
if you're
Dr.
interested.
Pearman and I have talked about doing something, so maybe that's something we could look at in the future, for
Yes,
sure.
yes, yes. I have not told our listeners, but I am going to be relocating university. So I will be working with Dr. Perryman starting in August, which I'm excited about, in Arkansas. So really supporting a community that is scores low on everything, but really invested in children. And so that's an exciting endeavor to take on. So, but yes, I think that could be fun. For our listeners, thank you so much for your time. Don't forget to subscribe to our page here. You can also email us at info@playtherapyspace.com. Or if you want to speak to me directly, you can do Christy@playtherapyspace.com. Or if you want to talk to Maggie, you can send her an email at maggie@playtherapyspace.com. Don't forget, we do newsletters too. When you subscribe to our page, you do get access to those emailed newsletters. So be on the lookout. Thanks, guys. Have a great day. Bye, PJ.
Thank you for all that you do too. So I appreciate
Oh,
it.